the edge of a forgotten town stood an abandoned train station. The tracks were rusted, the timetable board frozen in place, and no train had passed for over 50 years. Yet locals swore that at midnight the sound of a whistle echoed through the air, and a train with no driver arrived. They called it the last train. The small town of Oakhaven sat shrouded in mist, its Victorian houses huddled close as if seeking warmth in their proximity. Most of the townsfolk had long since left, abandoning Oakhaven to the creeping vines and the whispering wind that carried secrets through the skeletal trees. Those who remained were mostly elderly, their bones creaking like the floorboards in the houses they inhabited, and they told stories of a time when life thrummed through Oakhaven streets, when children's laughter rang out instead of the mournful hoot of an owl. One such local legend was the midnight train, a spectral locomotive that rumbled into town precisely at 12 o'clock every night, its headlamp cutting through the darkness, its whistle a mournful cry. It never stayed long, just long enough to pick up its passenger, whoever was foolish or desperate enough to board it, and then it vanished back into the mists from which it came. Many a night, young lads had boasted they'd be unafraid to ride the midnight train, but come morning, they were always missing, vanished without a trace. Others claimed to have seen the train pass by during the day, a fleeting glimpse of a bygone era, but those who saw it were forever changed, haunted by what they witnessed. Yet there were some who sought out the train, drawn to it like moths to a flame, and these were not the types to heed warnings or respect the dead. These were the desperate, the lost, and the curious. But none ever returned to tell the tale, for the train didn't just carry passengers, it carried their souls. Now, one blustery night in late October, a traveller named James found himself stranded in Oakhaven. His bus had broken down, and the locals warned him not to stick around after dark. But, being young and foolish, James scoffed at their superstitions and made himself comfortable in the old train station. He sat on one of the dusty benches, wrapped his threadbare coat tighter around him against the biting wind, and waited for the road to be cleared. The station was a relic of a bygone era. Its roof caved in here and there, its walls adorned with peeling posters advertising trains that ran to nowhere. The air was thick with mildew and the smell of decay, and the only light came from the sliver of a moon peeking through the grimy windows. But as the night wore on, James couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. He looked around and saw movement in the shadows, heard whispers on the wind that seemed to carry voices from beyond the grave. Then he saw it, a faint glow at the far end of the platform. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, but as he watched, the glow grew brighter, taking shape. Moments later, a black steam engine slid into the station, hissing like a wounded beast. Its headlamp illuminated the grime-covered platform, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and twisted like phantoms. Its windows were dark, devoid of any light, and the only sound was the rhythmic chugging of the engine. James felt a chill crawl up his spine, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the train. It seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, beckoning him closer. He wanted to run, to get as far away as possible, but his feet were rooted to the spot. Then the train lurched forward, its bell clanging loudly in the night. Despite the absence of any passengers, the doors at the front of the train opened with a metallic screech, and against all reason James stepped inside. The carriage was dimly lit, the source of which could not be seen in the darkness. There were a few scattered seats, but they were all occupied by passengers. They sat motionless, their eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. James tried to speak, to ask where they were going, or when they would arrive at their destination, but no sound came out. His throat was hoarse, his tongue heavy in his mouth. He swallowed hard and tried again, but all that emerged was a croaking whisper. The passengers turned their heads in unison and stared at him, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes empty and soulless. Then one of them spoke, his voice a raspy echo of what it once was. "Welcome aboard the last train," he said. "Where are we going?" James whispered back, his voice barely audible above the train's rhythmic chugging. "To a place beyond your understanding," the passenger replied. "A place where time has no meaning and the soul is laid to rest." James felt a surge of panic rise within him. He wanted to scream, to claw his way back to the door, but his limbs felt heavy, as if weighted down by some unseen force. The train lurched forward, picking up speed, and the scenery outside the window flashed by. It wasn't the rolling hills or babbling brooks that one might expect to see on a train journey. No, this was something far more sinister. Endless tunnels lined with skulls and bones whizzed past, each one a grim reminder of the train's final destination. James struggled to breathe, his lungs tightening as if in the grip of an icy vice. Suddenly, the train screeched to a halt, throwing James off balance. The doors at the front flew open, revealing a staircase that spiraled into darkness. "It's time," rasped the voice beside him. "Don't keep the others waiting." James wanted to refuse, to cling to the last vestiges of his sanity, but his feet moved before he could stop them. They descended the stairs, each step echoing ominously in the vast emptiness. As they reached the bottom, the passenger turned to him, his face illuminated by the faint glow from the carriage. "Thank you for joining us," he said, his voice echoing with an unearthly resonance. "Your soul will serve us well." And with that, he pushed James forward and into the darkness. James screamed, his voice echoing through the tunnels, bouncing off the countless skulls and bones that lined the walls. But no one answered. He stumbled blindly, his hands outstretched, desperate to find a handhold in the darkness, but there was nothing there, only the cold, hard reality of his fate. As his eyes slowly adjusted to the gloom, he saw that he was in a vast cavern, the ceiling lost in the shadows above. In the centre, a massive clock tower dominated the space, its hands frozen at midnight. Around him stood figures, each one a spectre of death, their eyes glowing with an eerie green light. They were dressed in clothes from different eras, their faces twisted in expressions of pain and terror. And as James watched, horrified, they began to move, shuffling closer, their whispers combining into a cacophony of despair. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet gave way, and James fell into a pit of darkness. When he landed, he cried out, his body aching from the fall. But the others paid him no heed. They shuffled past, their whispers growing louder, their glowing eyes pouring into him. He tried to get up, but his limbs felt heavy, as if weighed down by the very essence of despair. And then he understood. These were not just souls. They were the damned, condemned to wander this place for eternity, forever seeking solace and finding only torment. And now James was one of them, trapped in a realm where time had no meaning. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, and James stumbled through the endless corridors, pursued by the whispers of the damned. He searched for a way out, for a glimmer of hope in the oppressive darkness, but there was none. He was lost in a labyrinth of despair, his mind slowly unravelling under the constant whispers. almost seeping into his bones. As he drifted into a dreamless sleep, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He didn't bother to open his eyes. He knew who it was, the one who had brought him here. "You have suffered enough," rasped the voice beside him. "It's time to take your place among us." And with that, the darkness consumed him, and James became another spectre among the damned. Every night, the residents of Oakhaven still hear the whistle of the last train, carrying souls to a place from which no one returns. And sometimes, if the wind is just right, they can hear the whispers of the damned, forever seeking solace